Hey everyone, welcome back. It is Icon. Thanks so much for checking out another episode of Esports Analysis. In today's video, we are going to walk you through the semifinals and finals matchup of CDL Paris on Championship Sunday. And then the second half of the video is going to be my updated power rankings. Last week when I put out this video, there was quite some controversy down in the comments, so I'm looking forward to what you guys have to say about my power rankings. I'll put a link on screen if you just want to skip forward to that part of the video also. But without further ado, the first matchup on Championship Sunday was Florida versus New York. And I will say, before we really dive into this, that the semifinals matchups for me were the most exciting part of Championship Sunday. Obviously, we know what happened in the finals. But with Florida and Subliners, this matchup here, first of all, everybody played really well. I thought that these two teams were super even. So just a little bit of a rundown. New York went up 2-0, and I thought my pick to win, which you can see on screen, was Florida. I thought that they might have not showed up on Championship Sunday. They just didn't look great out of the gate. So they lost the Gun Runner 250 to 208. They lost the Ramazza Search and Destroy, which was really impressive to me because Florida had been beating everybody on Ramazza Search and Destroy. Then after that, they barely won the Hackney Dom. They won that by 7. They came back and they blew New York out in the hard point that was after that, 250 to 133. And then the Arklov Peak Search and Destroy, the map 5 to round it out. That wasn't really close either. That was 6-3 in the way of Florida. But I thought New York played really well. If we're looking at bright spots, Mac, Attach, and Accuracy, they were really led by them the entire weekend. It starts with Mac with the 1.24. Attach also had a 1.24. Accuracy was above 1. And while Temp had a 0.9 and Zuma had a 0.83, I feel like not everybody can go positive, right? Especially in a matchup like this. One thing that I will say down below is that we didn't quite see the crazy numbers from Florida like we're used to seeing, or that we've seen the rest of the tournament leading into this. So Skies was only 1.1, Awakening was 1.1, Havoc had a 1.05, and then Pharaoh had a 0.9, and Frosty had a 0.7. So it's not like we saw the 1.5 Skies and the 1.3 Awakening in this one that we've been seeing pretty much the entire tournament leading up to this matchup. But you got to give it to Florida. They had their backs against the ropes, and they came through and they clutched up and they did what they had to do to make it into the final. The next semifinal after that, I could not wait for this one because everybody basically has these two teams neck and neck in Atlanta and Dallas. Just to recap real quick, Atlanta came out, won the Azir Hardpoint 250 to 145. After that, Dallas came back, won the Piccadilly Search and Destroy 6-4. This had to be Dallas's pick because they're super good at this map. Every time you see them play Piccadilly Search and Destroy, they usually end up winning this fairly easily, so it's impressive to see that they could also win that against Atlanta. After that, the Gunrunner Dom, Atlanta came back 163 to 131. Gunrunner Hardpoint went to Dallas 250 to 209, and I have been saying this, it seems like for the last 3 events, if you're going to beat Atlanta, you have to do it before map 5 because they're like 7-1 now in map 5s. If it goes round 11, they're like 5-0 or something like that. They just don't lose, right? They just don't lose map 5s in Search and Destroy. So the Gunrunner Search and Destroy, Atlanta won 6-4, and that was that. A couple things that I'll say real quick. When you look at the overall performance from Dallas, Clay was 81 and 81 in this matchup, had a perfect 1.0 KD. Other than that, Crimsix had a 0.8, Hugh had a 0.9, Illy had a 0.83, Shotzi had a 0.88. So everybody underperformed on Dallas's side in this matchup. And then when you look down below at Atlanta, Abizi had a 1.0, Celium had a 0.96, but Major Maniac had a 1.3, Priesta had a 1.1, which it's nice to see Priesta have a 1.1 because he really hasn't been playing that great as of late. I think it was last tournament in the matchup. It might have been Florida or the one before that. He had like a 0.55, so he has had some down time, some down matches, so it's good to see him bounce back in this sort of environment. And then Simp also had a 1.15. So overall, the slaying just went a little bit towards Atlanta. That probably had a lot to do with their victory, which led us, so I correctly picked the semifinal matchups here. I also correctly picked the winner here, which was the Florida Mutineers. So to go through this series, I mean, that map 3 was one of the most unbelievable things that I've seen in the CDL this year. So they won the Gunrunner hardpoint by 60, which says a lot because on the Hackney Yards and the Gunrunners, when those maps are super small, really favors the fast-moving, high-intensity SMG gameplay. Florida's proving that they play just as fast and they can handle the pressure. So they won the Gunrunner hardpoint by 60. Piccadilly Search and Destroy, they clutched up 165. And then in the Hackney Dom, it was 235-70. I mean, this to me was just unbelievable. I could not believe that in that map 3, it was as lopsided as it was. I mean, this is the most lopsided game. I'm hard-pressed to think of another one that's been that lopsided, especially how big of a situation this was in a finals, in a knockout map. What can you say about Florida? Just to recap the KDs overall. For Atlanta, Simp had a 1.1, Celium had a 1.0. Then after that, it was ugly. Abizi had a 0.64. Major Maniac had a 0.67. Priesta had a 0.65. 3 players. Think about this. If you go back 3 months, would you ever imagine in a finals that 3 players from the Atlanta phase would have a 0.6 KD in a finals matchup? That's just, it's mind-boggling to me. And then this is clearly Atlanta's nemesis, right? They're getting absolutely bludgeoned every time they play Florida. When you look at their KDs, Havoc had a 0.94, which is good for him because he plays so fast, right? He's kind of that objective-based player. But other than that, skies. I think I tweeted this out yesterday. How unbelievable was Skies? Of the last 3 tournaments, he's absolutely the league MVP of these last few tournaments here. Skies had a 1.87 in this matchup. A 1.87 in the finals against who many people would pick to be the most dominant team in the league. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Pharaoh had a 1.56, Frosty had a 1.2, Awakening had a 1.14. So this matchup, I don't know. It just seems to go Florida's way. I don't know if Atlanta's losing confidence or what, but they just look tremendous. And I will say that the last time I put out power rankings, I got a lot of flack from people for putting Florida number 1. I don't know why. People just didn't seem to agree with that pick. So I feel a little bit vindicated with that. But without further ado, let's go ahead. Let's get into my power rankings for post-CDL Paris. So first of all, we'll just start at the top. We'll go down from there. First one, you have to put Florida there, right? There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's just Florida. They deserve to be there. They've beat Chicago. They beat Dallas. They beat Atlanta. They've done it multiple times. They're the best team in the league. Skies is probably the best player in the league. Awakening looks great. Pharaoh looks great in big-time scenarios. So Florida has to be there. But the one change from last week, which I think this is what rustled some feathers in my last video, I have Atlanta at 2 and Dallas at 3. I think now that they've beat them in back-to-back tournaments, you have to put Atlanta above Dallas. I really thought that I just wanted to see them prove it one more time. I'm not an Atlanta hater. I'm not an Atlanta denier. I just wanted to see Empire lose again before I went ahead and made this change. But in that matchup, Major Maniac looked great. Simp and Priesta bounced back. Every single person, although it went to around 10 in map 5 Search and Destroy, every single person other than Clay had a negative KD in this matchup. So what can you say, right? I think that Atlanta has cemented themselves at number 2. I think there's a pretty big distance between 1 and 2 now. They can't seem to hang with Florida. So if you think about it, come any tournament, if Florida's on the top side of the bracket and Atlanta's on the bottom side, and they end up matching in a semifinal or a final, how could you pick against Florida, right? I don't see it. I want to see these two teams clash a few more times, but super impressed with what they've done. And with Atlanta beating Dallas in back-to-back tournaments now, Atlanta has to be there at number 2. After number 2, this is where things get a little bit tricky, right? So I don't feel like any team out there has really cemented themselves as that number 4 spot. But just basically because of that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stick with Chicago there. Again, do they deserve it? I don't know. I mean, they've looked okay. They've recently won an event. I know it wasn't like the last event that they played, but they're still playing decently well. They played Florida really tight at CDL Minnesota. They beat Toronto, where Toronto looks like a pretty good team. They did get beat by LAG, but before that at CDL Seattle, let's not forget that they beat Legion 3-1, they beat Rocker 3-0, they beat New York 3-1, they beat London 3-1 to go on and win that event. So I don't know how much they deserve to be in that position, but I just feel like there's nobody else that should be there. Making my biggest jump in the rankings at number 5, and again, just because I don't know, it's almost a process of elimination in a way. I have New York at number 5, and maybe this is a little bit high. I won't debate that. I won't go against that. But the way that they played all week and their ability to play Florida right down to the wire, I think that they've shown that they can hang with some of these better teams, and I would like to see them make that next step in a semifinal and make it to a final. But they did have the matchup against Florida, and they played Florida a heck of a lot harder than Atlanta did. But again, it could just be lightning in a bottle, right? We need to see it more than just once or twice. But I feel like with the way that they played overall this weekend, New York deserves to be there. Mac and accuracy, and I guess you could throw attach in there also, have shown to be pretty consistent in big-time matchups. So I feel like if Temp and Zuma start to play that way, then they're going to be a team to be reckoned with. So I have New York at 5th. After that at 6th, and this is a little bit of a pass. I will agree with people that this might be a little bit of a pass, but the last time that Minnesota played at their last matchup, they weren't at full strength. So that's the first part of it, right? They just had an injury leading up to that event. They looked like, or at least as their coaches tweeted out, they looked the best that they had looked. So I really wish that I could have seen Minnesota at full strength at CDL Minnesota. But, of course, their last event, they lost 3-1 to Dallas, lost 3-2 to Seattle. But again, this is a pass. I'm just putting there because I want to see them at full strength. Again, they were injured. So I give Minnesota a little bit of a pass. When they come out, if they're at their full roster again and they play terribly again, then it's probably time to move them down some. But I'm just going to leave them there for now. Hopefully we're all okay with that. After that, my biggest drop in the ratings from last week is London at 7. I totally get the fact that people could say, well, London should be at 6 and Minnesota should be at 7. I would be totally okay with that if somebody else had that in their ratings, but Minnesota just didn't, or London just didn't really look all that great in this matchup. So round 1, they lost to Dallas 3-2. I know it went to that map 5 search and destroy, but Dallas ended up winning that 6-2, and it really wasn't all that close. After that, they beat Legion, but everybody's beating Legion now, so that just is what it is. They even did lose a map to Legion. I get it was around 11, but they still did drop a search and destroy to them. Then after that, they came out and they got completely blitzed by Dallas. That first weekend, I was really looking forward to that Dallas and London matchup because I did have London at 5, and I was ready for London to make that next step and maybe rise above Chicago at number 4. They just didn't do it. They just didn't come through. With that being said, they did look pretty good in their last tournament at CDL Seattle. They beat LAG. They beat New York 3-0. They beat OGLA 3-2. They did lose in the finals to Chicago, but I just want to see. I get that as of late, they look a little bit more impressive than Minnesota does, but we're giving them a pass, okay? So give them a pass. Let's move on. After that, and really from 8 through 12, it's kind of like, what have you done the last couple tournaments? Because nobody's really standing out the way that those top 7 teams are. So the most controversial part of my rankings might be 8, 9, and 10. But at 8, I stuck with LAG there, just again, based off of how they played in their last matchup. So in case we've forgot, if you go back to their last tournament, which was CDL Minnesota, they came out and they beat Toronto 3-2. It was close, but that's why I have them over Toronto, who I have at number 10. After that, they lost to Florida 3-1. We all know that they beat Chicago and knocked them out of CDL Minnesota. Then after that, they ended up losing to FaZe. It was 3-2. It was super close. but I think that they've shown as of late that they can be a team that can play, especially the way Blast has been playing. Vivid in Search and Destroys, plays like a madman. He's always making great plays. So I have LAG at 8. That can fluctuate by tournament, right? If they come out in their next tournament, they're playing at CDL New York, then we could drop them down if they have a bad performance, right? It just depends. This is kind of just a fluctuating schedule here. So we have LAG at 8. Then Toronto at 9. Toronto, you might be able to argue that they could or possibly be a little bit higher. Everybody sees this differently, but this weekend they lost 3-2 in a heartbreaker. Again, we talked about this in Saturday's video, but it was 6-5. They lost round 11, Search and Destroy. Again, if you're going to beat Atlanta, you better do it before map 5 because their clutch factor is on another level. After that, they beat OGLA 3-0 in that matchup. Remember, that was the first hard point. They won 250-49, absolutely blew them out of the water. Then they battled against New York. They won map 1, lost map 2. After that, they lost the Dom by 7, and they lost the hard point by 20. So Subliners had a really good weekend, but they were right there. We'll see what happens in the coming weeks. They're both of these teams are going to be at CDL New York, so we'll see what happens there. Moving on to 10, I feel like, well, I'll do this. Well, I guess I'll just give them all. Well, for 10, I have OGLA. I just feel like this was, I don't know, this is just a team that we can't, I just feel like we can't count on, right? So they went 0-2 this tournament, were knocked out. They lost 3-1 to New York, and then they lost 3-0 to Ultra, which we just talked about. The weekend before that, or the tournament before that at CDL Seattle, they lost to Rocker 3-2. Then they beat Legion, they beat Rocker, and then before finally falling to London. But I don't know, they're just so up and down. Remember, we're only a couple tournaments removed from CDL Florida where they matched up with FaZe in that final. They were almost up 2-0. We all remember TJ's little blunder there. But I don't know. I just don't feel like I can trust them, especially after this last weekend when Dashy had matches where he had like a 0.5 KD. TJ looked terrible. Chino and Kenny didn't really play well. Even Slasher had a couple down matches, which is that's totally something that we haven't seen over the past couple tournaments. Slasher has always had like 1.3, 1.7, 1.2. Like he's been performing every single match. So a little bit weird to see Slasher not play well. Then at 11th, I have Seattle. And at 12th, I have Paris. I can't wait to see Seattle play again just because they looked like a different team with Proto in the lineup. Again, I want to see them play a little bit more, but I feel like there's something there now, right? Every time Seattle played before, we're like, okay, who's going to beat Seattle in this matchup? But at CDL Minnesota, remember, they almost beat Atlanta. They came back. They beat Minnesota. They got spanked by Dallas, but they're making progress, right? Which is something that you can't say for Legion. The last few tournaments for Paris, I don't know what's going on, but in this tournament, their home series, they got blanked by Florida. They lost 3-1 to London. Before that, they went 0-2 in CDL Seattle. Before that, they went 0-2 at CDL Florida. Before that, they beat Seattle when Seattle was a train wreck at CDL Dallas. And then they lost to Chicago, lost to Minnesota. So, I mean, they're just on a free fall, right? I don't know what's going on with Paris. I don't know if they need to make a roster change or what, but I just don't have a ton of confidence in them at the moment. So these are my power rankings post CDL Paris. I can't wait to update this after CDL New York. I can't wait to see with all the teams that are playing, does New York play well? Does LAG rise a little bit? Does Toronto rise a little bit? I'm super excited to watch that. This is one of those videos. I can't wait to see your comments. Put them down below. What do you disagree with? What do you agree with? Again, let me know down below. I'm interested in your takes, and I want to have some conversations about these. So if you're new around here, you enjoy CDL content, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I put out brand new videos analyzing the Call of Duty League every single day. Again, leave any comments down below. Leave a like before you head on the way. It really helps out the channel. And with that, guys, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed my coverage of CDL Paris. I will see you in tomorrow's upload where we do a few more team scrims.